The moment Serena Voss walked into the office that Friday morning, something was different. Ethan Cole had worked as her executive assistant for 2 years, and he had learned to read the room the way sailors read the wind, quietly, carefully, and always bracing for a storm. But this was not a storm. This was something else entirely. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with unusual urgency. Her jaw was set just a fraction too tight. And when she passed his desk without her usual sharp nod of acknowledgement, he knew the day was going to be anything but ordinary. Serena Voss was the kind of woman who made entire boardrooms go silent just by entering. She had built Voss Capital from a small investment firm into a powerhouse that managed over $3 billion in assets, and she had done it all before the age of 34. She was brilliant, relentless, and completely untouchable, or so everyone believed. Ethan had spent 2 years seeing the cracks no one else got close enough to notice. The way she stayed in the office until midnight, not because she was dedicated, but because going home to an empty penthouse felt worse than spreadsheets. The way she laughed a second too late at jokes, like she had to remind herself to be human. He had never said any of this out loud, of course. His job was to anticipate, support, and disappear when necessary. By noon, she called him into her office and closed the door, which she almost never did. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling window with her back to him, staring at the city skyline stretched beneath them like a map of everything she had conquered. When she finally...
This is AK Stories, where emotional stories remind us that one act of kindness can change everything. If you believe kindness still matters, press like, share this story with someone special, comment below, and subscribe to AK Stories for more inspiring stories.
Turned around, Ethan saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before, not vulnerability exactly, but the closest thing to it she would ever allow. She told him she had a dinner that evening at Aurelius, the rooftop restaurant downtown. It was not a business dinner, she said. It was a family dinner. Her younger sister was getting engaged, and their parents would be there. And her mother had already made it clear in a text that morning that Serena's continued singlehood was becoming something of a family embarrassment. She said all of this in the same tone she used to discuss quarterly reports, measured, controlled, almost clinical. And then she said it. She said that she needed him to come to the dinner and pretend to be her boyfriend. Ethan was certain he had misheard her. He asked her to repeat it, and she did, without flinching, without any trace of humor. She told him it would only be for one evening, that she would compensate him for his time, that he simply needed to sit beside her, act naturally, and help her get through the night without her mother turning the engagement celebration into an interrogation about Serena's personal life. She said it the way she asked him to reschedule meetings or arrange travel, transactional, efficient, already moving on to the logistics. And maybe that was why it stung somewhere beneath his professionalism, somewhere he had no business feeling anything at all. He said yes. He told himself it was because she was his employer and this was a reasonable request, and maybe that was even partially true. But the fuller truth, the one he kept folded away in a place he rarely visited, was that he had spent 2 years watching Serena Voss carry the weight of her own life entirely alone, and some quiet, stubborn part of him had always wanted to stand beside her, even just for a night. He went home, changed into the only suit he owned, that wasn't for job interviews, and met her in the lobby of Aurelius at 7 o'clock. When he stepped off the elevator and saw her standing there in that cream dress with the city glowing behind her through the glass walls, something shifted in his chest so abruptly that he had to remind himself to breathe. She looked at him in a way she never looked at him in the office, not like an assistant, not like a resource, just like a person she was relieved to see. She straightened his lapel without thinking about it, and then seemed to catch herself and look away. The dinner was more complicated than either of them had prepared for. Her parents were warm but pointed, the way only parents can be, her mother in particular. A graceful woman named Claudette, who had clearly spent years worrying about her oldest daughter in the way mothers worry about daughters who seem to need no one. Her younger sister Margot was radiant with her fiancé, glowing in the specific way of people who have recently stopped being afraid of wanting something. The table was full of laughter and wine and questions, and through all of it, Ethan sat beside Serena and did what she had asked. He answered questions about how they met, kept his hand close to hers, laughed at the right moments, and said the small, truthful things that made the larger fiction believable, that she worked harder than anyone he had ever known, that she made every room she entered better, that he admired her in ways that were difficult to put into words. What he had not expected was that none of it would feel like a performance. At some point during the dinner, Margot leaned across the table and asked Ethan what he loved most about her sister. The table went quiet in the way tables go quiet when they sense the answer actually matters. Ethan looked at Serena, and Serena looked back at him with an expression that was almost afraid not of the question, but of the answer. And Ethan said, slowly and without artifice, that what he loved most was the way she cared about things she would never admit to caring about, that she sent anonymous donations to the charity drives her employees organized, that she remembered the names of the security guards' children, that she worked herself to the edge of exhaustion not because she was chasing money, but because she was terrified that if she stopped building, she might have to sit still long enough to feel how lonely she was. He did not say that last part. He stopped just before it. But the rest of it he said, and the table was very quiet, and Serena did not look away from him. After dinner, they walked to the edge of the rooftop terrace while her family lingered inside over dessert. The city sprawled below them in 10,000 lights, and Serena stood with her arms wrapped around herself in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. She told him he didn't have to say all of that. He told her he only said things that were true. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said something that he would replay for weeks afterward. She said that she couldn't remember the last time someone saw her. Not her success, not her company, not her reputation. Just her. He wanted to tell her that he had always seen her. That for 2 years he had been watching her from close enough to know that the armor she wore was real and heavy, and that she had built it piece by piece out of every disappointment she had ever refused to cry over. He wanted to tell her that the version of her that ate lunch at her desk and sent 3 emails before 6 in the morning and once cried in the parking garage and thought no one noticed he had noticed, and he had thought about it more than was professionally appropriate. And tonight, standing here in the city lights, none of it felt like an arrangement anymore. He didn't say all of that. But he didn't have to. She looked at him, and he looked at her, and something honest and unscripted passed between them in the dark, the kind of thing that can't be faked and can't be undone once it happens. She reached out and took his hand, not for anyone watching. There was no one watching. She took his hand because she wanted to, and he held it because some moments ask you to be brave enough to simply stay in them without running. They stood there for a long time, and the city hummed below them, indifferent and luminous, and Ethan thought about how strange and fragile it was, the way a single evening could rearrange everything you thought you understood about your own life. He had walked in thinking he was doing her a favor. He was leaving knowing something had shifted in him at a cellular level, something that could not be filed away or kept professional, something that would ask him tomorrow and the day after to figure out who he was willing to be. The night ended quietly. Her family said warm goodbyes. Her mother hugged Ethan with a sincerity that made his throat tighten. Serena walked him to the elevator, and before the doors opened, she looked at him with those careful eyes and said, simply, "Thank you." He said it was his pleasure, because it was not the performance, but the person. All of it had been his pleasure. He rode down alone and stepped out into the cool night air, and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking up at the building until he found the lights of the rooftop still glowing 30 floors above. He thought about second chances and proximity, and the terrifying arithmetic of realizing you have been standing next to something important for 2 years without calling it by its name. He pulled out his phone and typed a single message to her. It said, "I meant every word." Her reply came 40 seconds later. It said, "I know." If this story made your heart feel something, if it reminded you of someone, or of a moment you almost let pass you by, please give this video a like and leave a comment below. Your support means more than you know, and it helps these stories reach someone who might need them today.